Welcome back, everyone, to another Weather at a Glance video. In today's forecast, we are going over our first preliminary spring forecast for the spring season of 2024, all coming up in just a bit. All right, now before we get into our forecast maps, as always with the first seasonal prediction, I want to go over the official NOAA Climate Prediction Center ENSO forecast. This has been issued as of January 2024, and what this is showing us is kind of where we are with our index of the Nino 3.4 region. So whether we have above average sea surface temperatures, below average sea surface temperatures, or neutral. So right now, we are looking at above average with our El Nino. As many of you know, we are currently in an El Nino phase here. You can see we are still in that El Nino standpoint. Now, for the last couple months, El Nino has been the big talk. Everybody has heard about it. All of the weather channels, news stations, they've all been talking about it. But what's coming up next is going to switch things up back to normal and then headed into potentially La Nina territory. So, as you can see here, the gray is indicated as a neutral phase. And this is what we're looking at for our spring season. So, we are looking at for April, May, and June into May, June, and July. That's when we start to see that neutral phase kind of take over from the El Nino. And this happens pretty quickly. You can see we are currently 100% in El Nino still, but you can see that drops significantly around the time of March, April, May, and then we switch into that neutral territory, and that really happens very quickly. You can see here, one moment we're at around the 51 to 52% territory for that El Nino, and then we quickly switch things up. El Nino is all the way down towards the 20% range, and we see the neutral phase is up towards the 71 to 72% range. So you can see this switches around very quickly. This is going to happen very quickly, and we are going to be headed into that neutral phase and potentially headed into the La Nina by mid to late summer. Now, with that being said, we're now moving on to our temperature anomaly forecast map, and what this is going to show you is whether you will have above average temperatures or below average temperatures. Now, starting off, we're going to start off with the below average side. We are looking at slightly below average temperatures for much of the southeastern United States, up through the south central United States, much of the central United States, and even up into the Pacific Northwest and down into the southwestern United States. This goes from anywhere from Southern California all the way down here into Texas. We see a lot of these areas are expecting slightly below average temperatures. Now, where we are getting our data from for this is our recent temperature departures measured over the last 30 days and the last 90 days. This means what have we seen so far over the last 30 to 90 days? And we have seen below average temperatures consistent for these areas. Now, as for the slightly below average area, this is only slightly below what you would normally expect. But we have also seen some below average conditions also measured for much of the northwestern United States here. And again, this is going to continue likely into much of our spring season. You can see here just north of Denver, we do see below average conditions for Montana, northeastern Wyoming, northeastern Colorado, into western Nebraska, western South Dakota, and western North Dakota. So this is kind of what we're expecting to continue. And we also have looked into what we have been seeing over the past neutral spring years. So we can't just look at our current data because this is going to switch things up once we head out of El Nino into neutral. But with combining previous historic data of neutral years and looking at our current conditions, we can kind of get an idea of what to expect. Now, moving on to our slightly above average side, we do see for much of the western United States, we do see into California, central California, that is, over into Utah, and even to the southeastern Oregon, we do see slightly above average temperatures expected for our spring season. So this isn't going to be a really warm spring for you, but we do expect at times to be slightly above average. This is due to current conditions that we have been seeing, and this is likely going to continue into our spring season. Now, I do want to mention when we do get those deeper troughs into the western United States, so let's kind of draw this out for a minute. If we do get a deeper trough, so an upper level low that's going to bring a lot of that colder air down in the western United States, this will bring cooler conditions. But a lot of the time, we won't see that happening, and we are going to see a little bit of an elevated jet stream here around this area, and that likely will keep things a little bit warmer than average for those areas. Now, over here for the eastern half of the United States, we are still kind of in that El Nino territory, and even though we are switching to neutral, we are expected to continue these slightly above average conditions. So as you may have noticed, it's been fairly warm here for much of the eastern United States. It has been very nice. The further you get north, though, up into Maine, it's been still a little bit chilly, but we have been seeing those slightly above average conditions pretty persistently throughout much of the winter, and we're going to see those headed into spring as well. So this is not going to be anything too crazy warm, but slightly above average, maybe a few degrees above average than what you would normally expect for your spring season. That's kind of what we're looking at. Now, over here for the north central United States, this is the western Great Lakes area. we are expecting above average conditions. You may have already noticed it's been very warm for these areas, especially in the Minnesota. We've been seeing those 50-degree days as of February. That is crazy for this time of year. And we do expect those warmer conditions to continue into our spring season as we head into our spring season. Now, moving on to our precipitation anomaly, like the temperature anomaly, this is going to tell us whether we're going to have above average precipitation or below average precipitation. Now, starting off here on the slightly below average side, we are looking at slightly below average conditions for the north central United States. This stretches anywhere from Montana all the way over into the western Great Lakes. Now, again, this won't be too crazy. You're not going to notice drought or anything like that, but we will expect some slightly decreased precipitation throughout our spring season. And this season looks like it's going to be pretty wet for much of the United States. We do see a lot of areas very wet. So this is going to be a very active precipitation spring likely this season. But for the most part, we're going to see the jet stream sticking a little bit further south. So again, oftentimes coming through the Pacific Northwest, we do see that subtropical jet stream kind of kicking up here. The Pacific jet stream is going to be a little bit further south. So we do see at times it will be into California, and a lot of the western United States are going to get affected, but that will keep things generally out of the way for the north central United States. So we're going to see a lot of that precipitation heading down here rather than up to the north central United States. But do keep in mind, when we do get those ridges over the western United States, which will happen occasionally, especially with positive PNA patterns, we will see that precipitation being pushed a little bit further north and oftentimes affecting the north central United States. Now, moving on to the slightly above average precipitation side, we see much of the United States is in the slightly above average precipitation side. And this is due to our active jet stream. And we're going to see an active subtropical jet stream off of the Pacific here. So we will see this pretty much throughout much of the spring season here. Again, slightly above average is not indicating anything too crazy precipitation wise, but we do expect some slightly increased precipitation from what you would normally expect. So this will be likely a pretty active precipitation season for much of the United States. We will see a lot of storminess, and this is generally going to bring some nice wet conditions. So this is going to be good for plant growth, and this is going to be good for much of the United States to get that precipitation that maybe has been neglected in the past seasons. Now, moving on to our above average regions, we have three distinct above average regions here. We're going to start off in the western United States over here for California. Now, as you may have noticed, we have had some big precipitation events with those atmospheric rivers that have been coming through. I don't expect anything too crazy like that to continue on into the spring, because those are pretty rare events, but we will likely expect continued precipitation into our spring season. We're going to see that subtropical jet stream coming off of the Pacific. That's going to keep things very active for California and areas even up into the Pacific Northwest. But we do see California is likely to experience above average precipitation continuing into the spring. Now, moving on to our central United States, we do see above average precipitation here as well, down into Texas and even up into Illinois and the southern Great Lakes. We do see a lot of these areas are expected to experience above average precipitation. Now, this does not mean you will see precipitation every day, all the time, 24/7. That's not what this is saying, but we will see oftentimes when we do have that ridging down here over the southeastern United States, we will see that jet stream kick up a lot of moisture and a lot of precipitation and storminess over the central United States, and even down here collecting some of that Gulf moisture and kicking it up to the north here into this region. So we will see a lot of storminess for this area, and this is generally going to be a pretty active season for precipitation. Now, finally, over here into the mid-Atlantic and northeastern United States, we do see above average precipitation. This will likely bring a good bit of rainfall for these areas as well. Again, you've already seen with those winter systems, we have seen a lot of sleet, mixed precipitation, and even snowfall for much of these areas. So it's been a pretty active season so far, and I do expect that to continue into our spring season in 2024. Now, finally, we're going to move on to our overall forecast map. This is just going to give you a general idea of what you can expect overall for your spring season. So starting off here in the southwest United States, we are looking at wet. Now, as you may have noticed, this is pretty easy to tell. This is going to be a wet season for you guys. So anywhere in here, you do have the chance to see a good bit of precipitation this season, more so than what you would typically expect. So this doesn't mean you're going to see all the time crazy amounts of precipitation, but generally these areas, as we move out of the winter and into the spring season, these areas generally start to quiet down with precipitation. But this season may be a little bit different. We're going to expect a little bit more wet conditions, some light to moderate precipitation with those storms coming through, maybe even some severe weather at times, depending on where you are, such as over here in Texas. You may see some storminess, some stronger storms, and we just will see generally active precipitation patterns for the season this spring. Now, shifting up to the north, we have this on and off region. Now, this is a pretty large region, but this is showing you that basically we're going to be on and off between what we see up here and what we see up north. So it's going to be switching around. Again, like I said before, we're going to see oftentimes troughing and some deep troughs over here in the western United States. But at times we could see some ridging as well. Again, This is pretty typical. We do see pattern shifting, and this doesn't mean this is going to define your season. But generally, we're going to see a lot of that troughing, and that's going to be pretty persistent throughout the season. But at times, we will see that ridging, which could bring warmer conditions and drier conditions to the southern United States here. So it's going to be pretty on and off for this area, but you could still see some wet conditions along with the south here. But at times, it generally will be a little bit different than what you could experience down to the south. Now, shifting over here into the central United States, we have occasional storms. And the reason this is not severe weather like over here to the east is because we're generally expecting some shifting conditions. So again, let's draw out that jet stream. So we do see that deep troughing over here in the western United States that we do expect. And then we see that jet stream expected to kick up northeast. Now, as you can see, this is neglecting the central United States. So we don't really see a lot of severe weather here for this season as we're expecting it. But we do see that at times, if we get the right conditions, for example, if that ridging happens a little bit further west, we could see warm air advection head up into the central United States, and that could bring the right conditions for severe weather for this area. So what this is basically saying is we're not expecting as active of a severe weather season as out here in the eastern half of the United States, but we are expecting severe weather to continue over here for the central, just not as often. All right, now as we did just mention here, we do have a severe weather region here for the southeastern United States and even up into the eastern United States over here. And don't let this get you worked up. This doesn't mean you're going to see tons of tornadoes this season or tons of crazy weather all the time. But what this indicates is where I expect the most active severe weather pattern to occur out of the entire United States. So here this season, we do expect, due to the dynamic setup here with this season, again, let's draw the jet stream out. So we see that troughing over the west, and then that's going to kick up northeast here likely pretty often. And what this does is allows warm air to be brought up with these systems that move through here. That's going to be warm air advection, bringing warm, moist air, unstable air into this atmosphere. And what that's going to do is it's going to create an unstable environment for storm development. Now, this is going to allow for lots of storm development to occur over this region, likely more often than the other regions. So this is where the most active severe weather will likely occur this season. So this doesn't mean you're going to see bad weather all the time. This doesn't mean your spring season is going to be very stormy, but this likely indicates where we're going to see the most severe weather out of the entire United States. So up here for the northern United States, we do expect warmer weather here for this region. So generally warmer than what you would normally expect. We do see some areas will even see above average conditions, especially for the western Great Lakes here, but just generally warmer conditions than what you would normally expect. So a nice warmer spring season. So if you've been up here for the past couple seasons, it's been cold, it's been brutal. This is likely going to be a nice mix up, especially as we head up into the spring and the summer. Warmer conditions are expected as of now. And finally, in our last region on the map, we are expecting stormy conditions over here for much of the eastern United States. So east of the severe weather region, we do expect those stormy conditions to continue, not as significant as the severe weather region, but we do expect with our jet stream pattern, with a lot of that Gulf moisture being picked up and kicked up into the eastern half of the United States, especially with ample moisture from the Atlantic, we do expect a lot of stormy action. So generally stormy weather conditions over here for the eastern United States. All right, I want to thank you all so much for watching today's forecast. A big thanks to today's sources, the NOAA Climate Prediction Center, where those graphics came from at the beginning of the video. A big thanks to our channel members, Brett Caruthers and Chris Betty. Thank you for keeping the channel going. I would ask you to consider subscribing for more use forecasts free of charge, and would ask that you consider following the Weather at a Glance official Facebook page for more inside information and complimentary personal forecasts when you message me on my Facebook page. Again, I want to thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.